welcome everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our League of Women Voters of Alabama Voter Education Series. I'm Kathy Jones, President of the League of Women Voters of Alabama. And today we're joined by the National Federation of the Blind of Alabama for a program entitled Voting in Alabama, the Blind Experience. It's so critical that we listen and learn about the challenges and hurdles that blind and visually impaired voters experience in Alabama. Voting rights is the most fundamental right of citizenship, and it must be guaranteed and protected. And as we're seeking to understand each other, let's find ways to work together to support each other so that we can all have equal access to the ballot. And now I'm really excited to introduce Barbara Manuel, President of the National Federation of the Blind of Alabama, and she will start this program off. And let me spotlight her so that she'll be here. And I'll be monitoring the chat box, and we have actually Grace Anderson will be monitoring the chat box. And I did want to say, if you have questions, if you could hold them go ahead and put them into the chat and hold them. We'll go through them at the end, and Grace will be able to share the ones that are being put into the chat, and then we'll ask other questions as we can. And we'll make a list of all questions that don't get answered and share it back with you afterwards. If you're looking for a live transcript, I've enabled the live transcript for this program, so you can go to the bottom of your Zoom panel and click on that, and it should pop up. And so for now, I'm gonna hand it off to Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Good morning, everyone. We're so glad that you were able to do this event this morning. As it has been stated, I am Barbara Manuel, President of the National Federation of the Blind Alabama affiliate. It is our desire to share with you the blind individual's dilemma when trying to engage with one of America's most fundamental rights afforded to everyone. As you know, the purpose of an election is to select the candidate that will most competently relay their constituents' views while proposing legislative bills and implementing laws on their behalf. Every registered voter wishes to exercise this right. Currently, due to today's voting practices in Alabama, the blind community's voting rights are inadequately addressed. We'll share a brief overview of who we are, and then transition into current laws pertaining to disability rights voters, barriers faced by the blind at the voting poll, proven options of casting an independent, safe, secure, and private ballot. Then, solution toward equality throughout the voting process for the blind. Presenting today, we have Lawrence Povinelli, JD, Affiliate Treasurer, National Federation of the Blind of Alabama. Luann Blake, JD, Director of Research Programs, National Federation of the Blind, Baltimore, Maryland. Michael Evers, Legislative Chairperson, National Federation of the Blind of Alabama. Percy Garrett, At-Large Chapter Chaplain, National Federation of the Blind of Alabama. And Jill Rossiter, At-Large Chapter President, National Federation of the Blind of Alabama. Now, we'll have a brief history of our civil rights organization. Mr. Povinelli.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking your Saturday to be with us. The National Federation of the Blind came into existence in 1940. Dr. Jacobus Timbrook, a lawyer, professor, and constitutional scholar, brought 16 individuals, 7 states together, realizing that the blind had to speak for themselves. We couldn't allow others to speak for us. So the main philosophy and presentation is that the National Federation of the Blind are the blind speaking for themselves. In our 81-year history, the organization is now in all the states, all 50 states, and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. Here in Alabama, we came into existence in 1942. We have come together to create legislation through our federal and state courts that help the blind. We have come together so that we can share our experiences as blind people. For example, when I joined, I became a parent and I wanted to know how to raise my child as a blind person. The National Federation of Blind puts on academies for blind children, the Braille Enrichment for Literacy and Learning, to teach independent skills and Braille to children. We have actually created our own centers because we realize that it's only the blind that can teach the blind in areas of structured discovery and the like. The National Federation of the Blind gives out hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarship. We come together in state conventions in all our states, but the more important thing is that we come together nationally and internationally. We get folks from all over the world that come to our conventions where over 3,000 blind people come together to share our experiences. So as you can see, the National Federation of the Blind has a long and rich history of teaching and educating not only the blind, but the sighted. And that's why you're here today. So to that end, I'm going to turn to Jill Rossiter to share our philosophy in more detail.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming. And as Larry has so eloquently told you about our rich history, we are the largest collective group of blind individuals advocating for ourselves. Our philosophy is that blindness is not the characteristic that defines us or our future. We raise the expectations for blind people every day, because low expectations leads to barriers to our accomplishments and our dreams. Today, I hope you will take away from here that we, the blind, are much like you. We have families, we have homes, we have jobs. We have the intelligence and the spirit to make our own decisions in life and just to steer our own paths. And with that, I'll leave you, and Ms. Lou Ann Blake, if you would take us forward.
Thank you very much, Jill. Greetings to everyone from the Jernigan Institute, which is the national headquarters of the National Federation of the Blind. I'm very, very pleased to be with you all this morning. Let me pull up my notes here. All right, so this morning I'm going to talk with you about voting law, and in particular, I'm going to talk about federal law. Most election law is state law, but when it comes to the rights of blind voters, we're also talking about federal law. So the first piece of federal law that I'm going to talk about is the Help America Vote Act. And this applies to in-person voting only. So we're talking about voting at a polling place or a voting center. And what HAVA requires is that there be at least one accessible voting machine in every polling place for all federal elections. The next piece of federal legislation that I want to talk about is Title II of the ADA. Now, you may be a little bit surprised about that. You know, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how does that apply to voting? Well, actually, it does. And what it requires is that voters with disabilities be provided an opportunity to vote privately and independently that is equal to the opportunity provided to voters without disabilities. And that applies to both in-person voting as well as to absentee voting. And there have been, and regarding absentee voting and the application of Title II of the ADA, there have been a number of federal court cases where federal courts have confirmed this interpretation of the ADA. Starting back in 2014, when the National Federation of Blind filed the first accessible absentee voting lawsuit against the Maryland State Board of Elections. Subsequent to that, we filed a case against Ohio. Last year, there were quite a few cases filed, and we got decisions in a number of states, including Massachusetts, North Carolina, Hawaii. Well, no, sorry, not Hawaii. New York, Pennsylvania, where the courts agreed, yes, that the Title II of the ADA does require that there be an accessible way to vote absentee. And then the third federal piece of legislation that I want to talk about is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And what Section 504 requires is that entities that receive federal funding cannot discriminate against persons with disabilities in their programs, services, or activities. So voting is a program, and I don't think there is a state or jurisdiction out there that provides voting services that does not receive federal funding. So Section 504 or the Rehabilitation Act applies when we're talking about voting. So because of this federal law and the lawsuits that we have had, and where federal courts have held that Title II of the ADA applies to particularly absentee voting, the position of the National Federation of the Blind is that state legislation is not required to provide an accessible way to vote absentee for voters with disabilities. And I guess I should back up a little bit and mention that in 2020, about half of the states did provide an accessible way to vote absentee for the general election last year. Now, Alabama was not one of those states, in spite of the advocacy efforts of the NFB of Alabama. So because of that, and because there are still states that do not provide an accessible way to vote absentee, we are working with our affiliates to get legislation passed in their states to ensure that there will be an accessible way to vote absentee through electronic ballot delivery and electronic return. Fortunately, there are a number of systems available that can make this possible. And I'm going to be talking about those systems a little bit later in the presentation today. But states that have recently passed legislation to permit an accessible way to vote absentee include West Virginia, Colorado, and Hawaii, as well as Nebraska. And when there's time for questions, I'll be happy to take any questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Michael Evers.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Luann. I'm going to go ahead and add further to the issues that we're having in Alabama regarding voting accessibly via absentee ballots. As many people are aware, Alabama is a largely rural state, and because of that, a lot of the voting precincts are in areas where it is lacking public transportation, making it difficult for people who are blind, who want to live independently, such as myself, to be able to have access to these facilities unless they have assistance from the benevolence of their family, strangers, and the like. And what we want to be able to do is to have a better way to be able to have options for folks to vote accessibly, to help hopefully eliminate some of these barriers, since voting is constitutionally a fundamental right that is given to all citizens in the United States. The state representative Hurst and Senator McClinton had proposed legislation to help us achieve that by introducing HB 145 and SB 238 into legislation for consideration to be passed to allow us to have a way to vote electronically and accessibly remotely, like the military is able to do, like some people in the armed forces. The problem that we have with this legislation were, number one, they proposed in the legislation that our blindness be certified by the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. And they honestly have no way to really diagnose and certify a person's blindness. Typically, when people receive services from AIDB or adult rehabilitative services, for example, they have to be certified by a physician who basically will verify that they're blind, document it, and then submit that documentation to these entities so that they can receive services. But most people do not choose to receive services from AIDB, for example, and having to be certified by them in order to be able to have the ability to vote electronically and remotely is taking away from their fundamental right to vote, when we would look at it as it's just another alternative to help knock down some of the barriers. And the best way that we could be able to allow folks to vote accessibly remotely is to just let them certify that they are blind themselves when they register to vote, and with the understanding that if they are caught lying or committing perjury, then they would be punished in accordance with the law. Now, with registration for voting, a lot of the forms, even though they're available electronically, are still not fully accessible for people who are blind and require a sighted person to assist them with being able to complete these forms. And as to the way that remote voting was going to be proposed, was the person who's voting, once they were registered and approved to be able to vote electronically, would have a way to go to a portal, online portal, and fill out the ballot electronically, but then they would still have to print the ballot out on a printer. Then they would have to sign it. And then of course they'd have to rely on a sighted person to physically mail that information to their election officials or their voting precinct, which will require somebody to basically put the information in an envelope, fill out the address and stamp it, and then we'd have to send it off that way. When there's a much better way to be able to do that, which we will go into later on in the presentation. But that was one of the major problems that we've had with this legislation, because while there was a way to vote electronically, there was no way to submit the ballot electronically. And the issue, we were told, was it was because it was a security issue, not so much that they didn't have the technology. I think what it was is a lot of them didn't really quite understand how the technology was being implemented, as in other states such as West Virginia, Colorado, and Hawaii, as Luann alluded to earlier. So with that, I'm going to pass this on to Mr. Lawrence Povinelli, who will further elaborate on what needs to be accomplished.
Thank you, Michael. Here in Alabama, we've definitely run into issues that we heard from Luann Blake, that the Help America Vote Act passed in 2004. And that required that each precinct have at least one accessible voting machine. Unfortunately, every election since 2004, we have not had consistent operation of these machines. We have had blind people show up where they couldn't vote. And one of the things that we in the National Federation of Blind realize, that independence is a part of our lives. And in order to vote independently, We want to be able to go wherever we go, whether it's the voting precinct, show up and have a machine that works so I can work independently, so I can cast my secret ballot. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen very much here in Alabama. In addition, as you heard from Michael, having rural areas, it makes the transportation difficult for blind people. Until there's autonomous vehicles, we can't get around independently with our cars. So the fact of the matter is, we in Alabama are now moving forward to ask for independence through voting, which has occurred in other states, as you've heard. We in Alabama realize that this can be done. We do not need the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind, as they only serve several thousand people when the statistics show there's well over 150,000 blind people in Alabama. And I would beg to differ that at least 100,000 of those are capable people that want to vote, assuming there's children in that number. So the fact of the matter is, that's what we want. We want to move forward so that we have the ability to work independently. We have not seen that here in Alabama, and we would like to be on the forefront when it comes to the ability to let disabled people vote, specifically the blind. So that is really where we're moving forward. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Percy Garrett to give us some specifics that we can start moving towards. So Mr. Chaplain Percy Garrett, you're on.
Thank you, Larry. Yes, my name is Percy Garrett. I'm located in Dothan, Alabama, and my heart's a little bit heavy and I'm troubled today because I'm a 22-year Marine Corps veteran and wounded in war. And I know that if I was overseas in a war zone today, I would be able to vote privately, online, electronically. Alabama would afford me the ability to vote electronically, online, and securely. So I hope to present to you all today why I believe it's that online voting electronically by returning my ballot to the registrar is secure and safe. First of all, I want to talk about some of the states that are already doing this technology, including Alabama. Colorado is one of the states that has successfully incorporated online ballot request and submission. Remember, I said request and submission. Now, and also keep in mind, in the great state of Alabama, since January 19, 2015, over 1.8 million new voters registered, and they registered electronically online. 73% of those 1.8 million voters, I should say, 73% voted registered electronically. So it is my contention that if you can register electronically, you should also be able to return your ballot electronically. And Colorado is one of those states that has incorporated online voter ballot return, and that's what we are looking for today. Right now, Alabama will allow us to receive our ballot, blank ballots, electronically, but we cannot return them electronically. But Colorado has seen fit to incorporate this into law. Now, I want to say this about Alabama. It has been very good to the military. It has allowed the military to return their blank ballots, receive their blank ballots and return them electronically by the internet through a web portal. And we're going to talk about web portals in a few minutes, along with blockchain technology. So the states that used electronic ballot return in 2020 in the 2020 general election was the following states: Alaska, California, Colorado. Colorado is at the top of the list. Connecticut, Hawaii, Nevada, West Virginia. And I'm not saying that all these states allowed it for the blind and disabled, but they allowed it for their citizens. About 19 states allowed electronic ballot return for their citizens in 2020, the 2020 general election. Massachusetts and Maine. Let's talk about West Virginia and blockchain technology just for a minute. West Virginia instituted blockchain technology for one county in that state. And it worked out so well that in the next election, they allowed it to be incorporated for all 55 counties of West Virginia. And what do? They use blockchain technology. Now, other states use what is called a web portal through secure email and secure faxes. And that has proven to be secure, but not as secure as what we call blockchain technology. So blockchain technology is a digital ledger. There's no paperwork involved. No paperwork whatsoever, so it cannot be tampered with. No paperwork on the voter's end, and the paperwork is only printed out by the registrar or a voter official. So it cannot be tampered with, as we'll see as we go on. Through its peers and its nodes, it verifies and processes the ballot and records all transactions across the system without any paper involved. Blockchain technology doesn't have a one-place destination for its data. It is transferred across different nodes around the country. That's why it's so hard to hack, so hard to be tampered with, because even if someone hacked my internet, it cannot hack the next node. So it cannot get the information that it's looking for, whoever that hacker may be. Because, number one, this ledger is never stored. My information that's transmitted across using blockchain technology is never stored, so it can't be found by a hacker. It exists in the chain of nodes, the millions of nodes. It exists in a chain of nodes around the country, not one location. So it's hard to hack blockchain technology. If it can be done, it's almost impossible. I'm simply saying that there is a way to ensure security for online voting. Thanks to encryption and decentralization, it is close to impossible for blockchain database transactions to be hacked. They are incorruptible, and each transaction is recorded in different nodes, and they're verifiable by the recipient and by the voter. The voter, him or herself, can look at their transaction before it's sent and keep a record of it. So if there is a problem, they have a record of what they did. So it cannot be falsified. One other thing too, that the blockchain technology and this network cannot be taken down by one person. It cannot be done. The network is stationary, cannot be taken down, and is not influenced by a single party, rendering it secure and safe. Since it does not exist in one place, it is secure. And guess what? The price of paper ballot voting costs between $7 and $25. That's not too bad. Not bad at all to allow me to vote, except I can't use a paper ballot. But now, through blockchain technology, the whole process from me to the office of registrar is 50 cents. You can't beat that. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. That's better than the post office. I wanted to say also, this blockchain technology doesn't concern itself with internet connection. We think about the internet connection being hacked, but blockchain technology doesn't worry about that, because any hacker with access to the terminal cannot access the next node. If he access one, that's it. So it does him no good. It does him no good. If you have a question about who is manufacturing and setting up these blockchain technology nodes, it is called Horizon State. It's a company called Horizon State, and they're setting these up around the country. Now, the way to use blockchain technology for me, for any person, you can use your computer, and I'm using my computer right now for my notes. You can use your computer or your smartphone. I think most military people from West Virginia overseas are not using computers, they're using their smartphone. And that technology has been proven to be secure. I said earlier that West Virginia started in one county, and the next voting period, it extended that privilege to all 55 counties of West Virginia. And in doing so, and using blockchain technology, citizens can vote without revealing their identity or their political preference. I had a problem with that in times past. I even voted early one year to protect my identity and my political preference. And I went to the registrar's office to cast my ballot. And guess what? Even there, I could not see the ballot. So the registrar, this registrar's office, helped me to cast that ballot. But you know what? I do not know what they put down. I told them what my preferences were for the amendment, for the candidates, for the party, but I have no idea what they put down. I only know what I told them. But with blockchain technology or any online electronic voting, I can control it myself. It doesn't matter if it's a web portal or if it's blockchain technology. One of the things that I want to close out with is once again Colorado's SB 188. It has been the hallmark of electronic voting. So if anyone wants to follow a state when it comes to electronic voting, follow Colorado and follow their SB 188. It is solid and it has worked. Alabama. This is my state. Alabama in August 2015 incorporated a pilot program to allow overseas military voters to cast their vote electronically. Not just military, but also overseas workers and their families to vote electronically. And once again, I served overseas. I served on a war zone. And if I was there today, I would be able to vote electronically. I simply ask for that same privilege today as a retired military person with a disability. I am the same person, and I desire to vote. So Alabama has done it already. So all we need to do is to piggyback on that same pilot program that Alabama did in 2015, 2016. If they can do it then, I'm certain that they can do it now because it's the same program, the same progress. I want to end with this. Doing paper ballots for me and any blind person, any disabled person, is like going down a rocky road and turning on bumpy boulevard and then exiting on obstacle course. Getting nothing done, having a hard time, just trying to exercise your right to vote. If our legislators, our representatives would help us with this legislation, we can ease on down Easy Street and vote for those politicians, those representatives who we can trust to legislate our lives. Thank you. At this time, I turn it over to Ms. Jill Rogers.
Thank you so much, Percy. You are a tough act to follow. Wow, very great. So as you all have heard, lots to be done here in our state. So we've heard about a lot of issues and a lot of problems. We want to come back with some solutions or things that we view as solutions. I'm going to give just a little bit of briefness over it, and then of course Luann's going to sum it up. For us, those of us that want to go into a polling place, who want to exercise that right, there is so much training needed for those poll workers. As the law states, the accessible voting machines should be at every polling place. However, the poll workers have little to none experience in being able to actually operate the machine, instruct someone else how to operate the machine. And we'd love to see some beefing up of that training. It needs to be a little bit of intuitive too. As you come in and you register and you sign in that you're going to vote, and you're struggling to find the line to sign your name, that should immediately impact the poll worker to say, we've got this accessible voting machine. I'd love to show it to you, and see if you want to use it to cast your vote privately and independently. And I think that very rarely happens because, again, we have difficulty even having the machines in the polling place. If they're there, they may be covered up by a nice dust cover and put in the corner of the room where nobody could access it or know that it's available. We definitely need to improve transportation throughout the state for all sorts of reasons, but voting is of course one of the most important things, as well as just being able to live an independent and productive life in our state. So I know we can't conquer that all here on our forum. That's something I bring to those of you who are here who can make an impact on our state for transportation, our legislators that have been here to learn today. And ultimately, our hope, our dream, our wants are to be able to cast an independent, private, electronic ballot receipt and return. Percy has done a fantastic job of giving information as to how that can be accomplished. We've had others to share what states have been able to do that. And I really hope that your ears and your hearts are open to this for us. Most of all, before you determine legislation that affects us, consult us. We should be at the table. It's hard to speak for another when you are not that person. I hope today has brought some enlightenment to you all, and I hope that you understand we're here as fellow citizens wanting the same rights as our sighted peers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Luann. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. So the National Federation of the Blind has conducted blind voter surveys since 2008. And as Jill mentioned, those surveys have shown that poll workers there are many poll workers who are not properly trained on how to set up or operate the accessible voting machine. So when a blind voter shows up at the polling place, the machine is not set up, which means they have to stand around and wait while the poll workers attempt to set it up. And our surveys have shown that this happens to about 1/3 of the blind voters who've taken our survey. So, you know, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who are showing up to the polls and are being inconvenienced and facing barriers to vote. You know, also, as we know, those of us who've used the audio ballot on the machines at the polling place, it takes a long time to go through those audio ballots. You know, and there's got to be a better way, and there is actually. And that is using an accessible electronic ballot delivery system. And these systems are accessible because they comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which means that you can use your own computer with your own access technology to mark your ballot, whether it be a screen reader, screen magnification, a refreshable braille display. If you don't have use of your hands and you use a voice dictation software to operate your computer, it will work with that. So it benefits many, many voters, not just blind and low vision voters. So Percy was talking about Colorado and West Virginia. Those states use the Democracy Live system. And that system is an accessible electronic ballot delivery system. It also includes electronic return in the portal. And there are other systems. There's the enhanced voting system, which is also an accessible web-based system. They are working currently to incorporate electronic return into that system. So there will be you know, another system that will incorporate electronic return. So there's a lot of work that's being done in this area. I should emphasize that these systems allow you to mark your ballot, some cases return your ballot, but you're not casting your ballot through these systems. The ballots are still printed out either by the voter or the election official if it's electronically returned, and then it is inserted into a tabulator. So the ballot that has been marked and returned using these systems is still tabulated in the same manner as any other ballot. And you know, there are a few other systems. I mentioned enhanced voting. There's also a system developed by Dominion Voting. The Maryland State Board of Elections has developed a system, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience using that system. And the state of Nevada has developed their own system as well, which is also a web-based system, which allows you to return your marked ballot by email from within the system. So the Maryland State Board of Elections developed a system initially for UOCAVA voters, military and overseas voters. And that system was made available to voters with disabilities starting in 2014. That system was made available to voters with disabilities as a result of a lawsuit that the National Federation of the Blind brought. I've used that system to vote in every election since 2014, the general election in 2014. And there's a number of reasons why I use that system. It's very easy to use, it's accessible, it's very convenient. I don't have to go to the polling place and deal with the poll workers who don't know how to operate or set up the accessible machine, who don't know how to properly interact with a blind voter, who are grabbing you and talking to you in an inappropriate manner. And I can, mark my ballot when it's convenient for me. Now, unfortunately, Maryland does not permit electronic return at the moment, so that does require me to print out the ballot. And this is a barrier that does prevent, unfortunately, a number of blind voters from using these kind of systems because they don't have printers. And so, that is an issue. And that's, one of the reasons why we need to continue to push for electronic return. But it is a very good system. The system is also used in New Mexico. The state of Maryland makes that system available for free to any jurisdiction that is using an election system and software, election administration software. So, maybe it's something that Alabama could use, something that they could look into. But there's a number of options out there for accessible absentee voting. I think that's it. I'm not sure who I'm turning it over to now, if it's Barbara.
Thank you. Yes.
Yep,
Thank
Barbara.
you so much,
Sure.
Luann, for that information. At this time, we're gonna see if we have any questions in the chat. We'll turn it over to Grace and Kathy.
Yes, this is Grace. There is a question. Let me go back up to it from Representative Clark, and it was in regards to Luann's previous talking points. It said regarding the surveys. Representative Clark wants to know, is it a national or statewide survey or both? And they would like to see the results of the survey.
Sure. Yeah, so it is a national survey, and I do also have the data, the raw data, sorted by state, and it is available on our website. I can also email the report to Barbara, and then she can make it available to anybody who would like to have it. Yep. So it is a national survey. So in 2020, for the first time, we actually did 2 surveys. All of our surveys prior to 2020 focused on in-person voting. But in 2020, since so many voters were voting absentee because many elections were moved to being primarily vote by mail, we also did a separate survey for absentee voters. So I'll provide both reports to Barbara. Or, feel free to email me, L Blake, that's LBLAKE at nfb.org, and I can email the report directly to you.
Thanks, Luann. Grace?
Okay, the next question is from Angela Fisher Hall from our library services here in Alabama. She says, I may have missed this before, however, are there any statistics on the number of registered Alabama voters who are blind and are visually impaired? any numbers on how many actually vote in the state and or national elections?
I'd like to ask Percy, do you have that information handy? I don't, but if not, we're gonna keep these questions and we're gonna answer those that we don't have information for right now. If we don't have it, you will get an answer. Percy, do you have an answer to the amount of blind registered voters, blind and visually impaired in the state of Alabama?
Okay, I was muted, but no, I don't have it handy, but I will get it, Barbara.
Thank you so much. Ms. Hall, we will have that information coming to you. Grace?
All right, scroll back up here for a minute. Because there was a question from Carol Prickett. She said, are there people representing the interests of the blind and visually impaired on the ad hoc commission recently created by the Secretary of State that is supposed to speak to the security of elections?
To my knowledge, I don't know of anyone. I know the National Federation of the Blind has not been approached to participate on it. That's something we will reach out. We'll do some research on it. We definitely need representation. So thanks for the question.
Yeah,
Kathy?
this is the voter fraud task force
Okay,
that just recently created, that he is not willing to stream or do any kind of remote access. He says that people have to come to his office to meet.
okay.
So it is kind of inaccessible for people who can't travel to his office. But he
Well,
is,
I'm sure, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that would be something that I think that's not where we have expressed our concerns about that to him in writing. And I guess he says anybody's welcome as long as they come to his room.
Okay. That would be a great tool for us. We definitely can have someone to visit the office during the event, and eventually, hopefully, we can get something where virtual or whatever. But initially, we would be able to have someone from our organization to join that meeting.
That'd be awesome.
Yes. Thank you, Kathy. Grace, we'll take one or two more questions and then we're going to have to close out, but we're going to keep all of the questions. And please know you will be getting a response from this forum.
Well, those were all the questions that were listed on here. I do want to make a note that Senator Ward just put in the chat, the newly established voter fraud task force spoke on this, but I know an attorney that advocates for ADA issues may have some influence.
Okay.
So, any other questions?
We will contact Secretary Maria's office and get a list, maybe he'll share a list of the individuals who are serving on this. And as I stated earlier, we would love to have someone blind. So that's what we're going to try to work toward. Any other questions, final questions before we move on?
Folks, come off mute if you've got a question. And if you want to raise your hand, we can call on you. Got a couple of more minutes. I'm gonna go to the next. It looks maybe kind of hard to see. All right, I don't see anybody raising their hand or coming off of mute. So I guess Barbara, we'll close it out. Did you want me to make my closing remarks and then hand it off to you?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I wanted just to thank all the presenters because this has been such a hot, enlightening presentation, and it's given us a lot of new perspectives that those of us, especially who are not visually impaired, just haven't had an opportunity to understand in the past. And I want to thank the legislators who are attending, as well as the disability and voting rights advocates who have joined us today. I know we're all together in our desire to ensure that all citizens have the right to vote and have accessible ballots, regardless of physical abilities. And we're looking forward to working with everyone here during the upcoming legislative session as we work to achieve the goal of having electronic access to the ballot for blind and visually impaired citizens. And I appreciate everyone with the National Federation of the Blind, and would like to hand it back to Barbara Manuel, and if you will close it out.
Thank you so much, Kathy. This morning, we have shared with you what the blind encounters as a registered voter in the state of Alabama. We're requesting our lawmakers, the individuals elected to speak for all people, to pass laws that will include everyone, thereby moving the blind from second-class citizenship in the state of Alabama. The National Federation of the Blind, Alabama affiliate, truly believe our legislators want their representation to reflect diversity and inclusion for all. This form was presented this morning to allow the blind to have a seat at the table, to convey our struggles that could be eliminated if only legislators propose bills that will enhance, not burden, blind individuals' lives. Now that you've been informed of these obstacles for the blind, grasping what changes are necessary should now be evident and apparent. And we sincerely hope changes will be forthcoming. And let me also thank each and every one of you this morning for joining this forum. We really appreciate the time that you have taken out your schedule to let us just share with you some of the things that we faced as blind individuals. Going forward, we're hoping and looking forward to working with you all to implement laws and allow us to be able to share our desires and what our needs are. And I believe each and every one on this line, as well as other individuals not present, would be open and willing to work with us. And on that note, again, thank you so very much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.